Have you appreciate the time?
Of course, thanks for having me.
I wonder, can you explain what it's like when you're obviously growing very quickly? The marketing effort is extraordinarily strong at a time where regulators, at least in the eyes of some, are getting more aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big thing here is that, we don't want to see regulation as a thing that stifles our business or the industry. We think regulation is incredibly important, and that's important to be working with regulators constructively. But that there are ways to do that while still being able to grow out your business. And, frankly, we think that that's the most important position to be in.
What do you make of it when some of I guess, your colleagues across the sector, and I'm thinking of Armstrong at Coinbase in this example, call the behavior of the SEC sketchy? Is that a view that is widely shared in the industry?
There is a wide variety of views. There are a number of people in the industry who feel that way. I think there's probably a number of people at the SEC who feel that way about the industry. I think there's certainly been some mutual tension there. And I think this is just a case where it got off on the wrong foot, I think, between a lot of players in the industry and between, the agency and between, Chair Gensler. And I think that, you know, this doesn't need to be a war between industry and regulators. I'll be really sad if it ends up as one. Because I think in the end, most people want the same thing, which is to be able to have access provided in a safe, regulated way to Americans for a new, growing, really exciting sector. And I think that unfortunately you see situations where the SEC feels like, there have been extremely non-compliant companies that have also been difficult to work with, and where the industry feels like they haven't gotten the guidance they want from the SEC. And, when there's sort of that divergence to begin with, and everyone's coming from a different perspective, sometimes that bickering just grows.
Yeah, I'd love you to respond. Actually, listen to Chair Gensler, who, as you know, joined us in the first half hour of our 9 o'clock hour, speaking specifically on this point that you're making, but also saying some strong things in terms of what he sees in the market. Take a listen, and then I'd love to have you respond.
Forward to further engagement with the companies in this space and the market participants. And it's really about how we bring basic investor protection to protect people against fraud and manipulation. And this is an area that's been rife with fraud and abuse.
I guess the rife with fraud and abuse part, Sam, is what stood out. What do you think?
Well, I think rewind 3 years, and I think I just agree with this statement. 3 years ago, it was an incredibly exciting growing space, and it was also extremely messy. And frankly, there were frauds. There were a fair number of them in the crypto industry. And there's also just a lot of market activity that would not have been allowed on a regulated platform. Now, I do think that things have been cleaned up by the industry to some extent over the last few years. I'd like to think we played a role in that. I'd like to think that others, including Coinbase, have played a role in that in terms of setting a different standard for the industry. But, I still think that there are completely reasonable steps to be taken here by regulators to try to have some boundaries on, I think like one example is market manipulation. And I think one thing that I would expect the SEC to be looking at now, and I wouldn't be shocked to see some movement on, is around coming up with some sort of guidelines for crypto exchanges. Right now, they live in the money service business regime, which is an appropriate regime for part of the activity. But, I would expect to see, anti-market manipulation, anti-wash trading regulations and policies start to come out. And, obviously we've seen the SEC taking action against scams in the industry. And I think all of those would be completely appropriate. We would welcome them. We've built out internal fraud detection tools. We're welcome to share those, and we're welcome to have dialogues. We've been reaching out to government agencies. On the flip side, I think it's important, and especially in the context of those happening, and I'm sort of presuming those will happen and that industry will be cooperative there, which I think it's very important industry is, that, along with that, there is over time sort of further guidance on, I think, some issues on which, there are really legitimate points raised in both sides. And I think, especially when you look at what tokens might be securities, it's a really hot topic in crypto. It has been for years. There have been some players that have completely disregarded that, and I think acted in a non-compliant way. I think the SEC sees that. But I also think that there's clarity that could be given on the margins there.